On today's show, the Capitals fall in the second game of the preseason, and already things that they need to work on. One, goal scoring, and two, limiting defensive breakdowns. Let's break it all down next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, I know it is only the second game of the preseason and we don't need to push the panic button, but that was definitely not some great hockey that was on display out on the ice this evening. You take a look at it, the Capitals are going to need to learn how to score goals. They're also going to have to learn how to limit defensive breakdowns. One thing is glaringly apparent is I cannot wait for more of the veterans to be entered back into the mix here, and hopefully this team will play a whole lot better. We'll talk about what went wrong tonight. A little bit later, we'll talk about individual player performances. It wasn't all bad. There were certain players that actually popped off the page. Who are those players? I'll talk about that. A little bit later, we will talk about those defensive struggles that have led to the Capitals' demise in the first 2 games. And then in the final segment, we'll talk about the outlook and potential cuts that could take place for the Capitals. But just to get it going here, talking about another rough loss for the Capitals. And it seems like the ghosts of last season are coming back to haunt this team to a certain extent. And I know it's important not to read too much into this, but with that being said, in 2 games, it has not been some stellar hockey, shall we say, and I think that a lot of things need to change. It was refreshing and it was fun to see Pierre-Luc Dubois and Matt Roy, 2 players that I've talked about and heard about for quite some time, to see what are they going to look like out on the ice, and all things considered. I think they played pretty well. It was good to see the compete level out of Pierre-Luc Dubois and kind of get a glimpse of ultimately what kind of player he is going to be in the future. But it's all about brushing off your shoulders, as the Capitals don't have a whole lot of time to lick their wounds as they're playing yet again Wednesday evening versus the Devils. In the second preseason game against Boston, Cristall and McMichael both found the back of the net, but the Capitals ultimately fell 4-2. Cristall has been a standout performer, scoring 2 goals in 2 exhibition matches. Shepard facing 19 shots during the game, demonstrating his ability to stand strong in the face of offensive pressure. That's one of the things I'll talk about a little bit later. Faravari showcased his defensive prowess by recording a game-high 6 block shots and tying Wilson for a team high in hits with 3. The Protas brothers, that was a good story out there as well. Alexei Protas led the team in shots on goal with 3 attempts. One of those I thought was going to find the back of the net. It wasn't to be, but a really good look from Alexei. McMichael's goal was assisted by Dubois and Wilson, so already kind of the makings of something that could play out a little bit further down the season. While Rybinski and Dubé provided the assist for Cristall's goal, the team is now looking to bounce back and pick up a dub versus the Devils. And that's where we're at right now. And I hope that, as like I say, the more veterans that get added to the mix, the better this team will play. But one thing is very apparent is that Andrew Cristall is making it difficult for the coaching staff, and difficult in a good way, because what does he do? He continues to contribute. And I think that it was kind of a foregone conclusion by a lot of the insiders, the ones that know the team the best, that, he's going to get a look, but ultimately he is going to get reassigned and sent down to the Kelowna Rockets. But it's going to be interesting. Can he continue to keep getting contributions? Again, that is going to make it very difficult to send him down, being that this team is looking for goal-scoring fuel. Andrew Cristall has been a bright spot in a not-so-great lineup thus far. But talking about the summary, Dubois contributed with an assist. The game saw the Capitals fielding more experienced players against the Bruins in their second preseason game. Despite some positive performance, the Capitals suffered in another defeat. And, you take a look at the teams that do things well. I thought the Bruins, all things considered, played a good game, as was evident on the score sheet. And, it's kind of easy to start to think, is this how it's going to go this season? And then I have to push those thoughts out of my mind and tell myself, Dan, it's only the second game of the preseason. This isn't even the regular season. Hopefully they can shore up all these loose ends before the puck drops in the first game. Talking about individual player performances, Connor McMichael, of course, looked really good out there, picking up a goal in glimpses of greatness and what we can expect from him this upcoming season. Pierre-Luc Dubois and Matt Roy both made decent debuts. However, the team struggled defensively, with Hunter Shepard and the defense having difficulty keeping up with Boston in the 4-2 loss. And again, I am not going to be too hard on Hunter Shepard, as it was not the best of the best playing out there. Historically, Hunter Shepard has been lights out. Of course, my detractors would say, see, Dan, that is ultimately why they went with Logan Thompson in the first place. So it's going to be a Chucky-Logan tandem. That's why they did it. I'm not so sure that's 100% true. Maybe the truth lies somewhere in the middle. But talking about those individual performances, again, Hunter Shepard saving 15 of 19. I'm not going to, dismiss him or absolve him of all guilt. It wasn't his best hockey that he's ever played, but I also know that it wasn't the most stout defense in front of him as well. But talking about that, Alexei Protas, 3 shots on goal, of course, a goal from Cristall and McMichael. And that's the positivity to glean from this game. There was not a whole lot of other positivity. I hate to say it. I know I don't want to be Debbie Downer here, but other than getting a good look at Pierre-Luc Dubois and Matt Roy, those kind of things, and kind of seeing, it's chemistry. And I talk about Connor McMichael, I talk about PLD and Tom Wilson. I don't think that's going to be actuality at any point, as it is kind of the perception that it's going to be Alex Ovechkin on the top line. I guess you could say that PLD and Tom Wilson could be on the second line, and that might be what they're thinking in the long term of things. But a pretty good chemistry, I guess I'm going to say, with that line in particular. It's going to be interesting to see how that grows as all of this progresses here. But that's what we're looking for, is steps forward. Another player that's going to make it very difficult, and I talked about this, and I've heard other people talk about it as well, is even Miroshnichenko. That feel-good story that he had the Hodgkin's lymphoma, overcame it, terminated his KHL contract, joined the Capitals at the end of the season, went to the Bears, and really found his game. But people are like, well, this season it's good. He'll join the team, but ultimately he's going to get sent down to Hershey because there's not enough room. He's making it very hard on them to want him to go down to Hershey. I don't think they want to, but it's like, who's going to get knocked out of the lineup to put Miro in? But Miro continued to impress, displaying impressed speed, skill, and physicality. Kind of reminds me a bit of Alex Ovechkin 2.0. And I don't want to jump to conclusions because they're both from Russia, but there definitely is a flavor or a vibe of Alex Ovechkin on the ice when you see Miro out there. Miroshnichenko stood out with an impressive stat sheet showcasing his contribution across various aspects of the game. Cristall also shown displaying his speed. Can you believe we're talking about speed? One of the Achilles heels of Cristall is something that seems to be working in his favor, displaying his speed and strong passing. We know he was a good passer. We know that he has a good hockey IQ, ultimately scoring a goal in the final minutes of regulation. Young player Ilya Protas also built a solid performance, nearly securing an assist. However, Ethan Frank faced challenges potentially affecting his chances of securing an NHL roster spot. So, you take a look at Ethan Frank. That was a guy that I had hoped maybe would find a spot on the team. But then I thought to myself, again, who's going to come out? There's a lot to love about Ethan Frank's game. His speed is the biggest thing. And, he finished the Bears rather high in goals scored. So there's a lot to like. But, what we've seen thus far definitely doesn't endear him, I think, to the coaching staff, and things that I think are going to need to be rectified if he is going to have a spot on the Capitals. Maybe he'll be given a call up at some point, but as of right now, I think it's a long shot for Ethan Frank to join the team out of camp. All right, so after the break here, we'll talk about other negativity. I'm not going to lie to you. It's about defensive struggles and the things that the Capitals need to change before New Jersey, before they take on the Devils. They don't have a lot of time. Can they do it? I'll discuss straight ahead. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And listen, sometimes when you're watching these games on NFL Sunday, you think to yourself, man, I'm really into my home team, but there's a lot of other football being played out there as well. But I'm not really that into those games. Well, open up the FanDuel app, and all of a sudden, those games are that much more exciting. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So struggles abound out there for the Capitals in the goal scoring department, but it wasn't just the goal scoring. Defensively, this team did not play some of their best hockey. And, it's not going to be the starters out there. It wasn't Carlson and Chychrun and Roy, and I get all that. But, you think to yourself, is this what this team is going to look like? Or with the veterans out there, is this team going to be better than they were last season? That is my hunch anyway. I don't want to read too much into this, but in these preseason games, it is still about assessing what's working and what is not. The defensive struggles. Hunter Shepard had a challenging night in goal, struggling to track shots and stay with the play. Additionally, the defensive pairing of Chase Priskie and Vincent Iorio experienced difficulties being on the ice for all 4 goals tonight. And you take a look at it, I did not have any hopes. I didn't think that Chase Priskie would break camp, and I thought that Vincent Iorio would be a long shot as well. And I'm not here to say that the game tonight sunk them, but it definitely did not endear them to the hearts of the coaching staff or the fans at the end of the day. I think that Vincent Iorio is one of the top prospects for the Capitals, but he is a guy that is going to need to see a bit more work. But with that being said, Chase Priskie played well for the Hershey Bears last season. At the end of the day, it was one game in a vacuum. I think that if there is an opportunity, you take a look at injuries will always present themselves through the season, that Vinny Iorio and Chase Priskie very well could get a call up during the season. Talking about shot generation and defensive pairings, the Caps have struggled to generate shots in the preseason, recording only 43 total shots in the first 2 games. During the preseason, Coach Spencer Berry paired Martin Faravari and Matt Roy, resulting in strong performance and positive differentials in shot attempts, scoring chances, and high danger chances. So as we make this march, it's going to be game number 3, Wednesday evening. I'm hoping that it's going to be even more veterans. I know what these games are about. It's about assessing talent, but Lord, I need to feel positive about this. There was quite a negative feeling at the end of last season. And, I looked at the acquisitions that were made, and I think on paper, this team is going to be a lot better. I listened to Alan May when he was already doing something on Monumental there, that he is also feeling positive about this team as well. And that's the important thing, I think, Capitals fans to realize is that these are just preseason games, and it was not a veteran-laden team out there. There were veterans out there, Tom Wilson, PLD, these kind of guys out there, but I think we're going to get a more accurate assessment once we see all the big guns out there together, like Alex Ovechkin. You take a look at Carlson and all the deep pairings, and once you see Charlie Lindgren, you see Logan Thompson, then I think we can fully assess this team. But taking a look at all these things, you take a look at those struggles. Those were some of the things that the Capitals did face last season with their big players in there. So we hope that this team is not going to face those kind of struggles this next upcoming season here. And they shouldn't, as they made some big acquisitions. Chychrun on paper is going to be a great defenseman with an offensive flair. Matt Roy does not offer that skill set as far as the offensive capabilities are concerned, but he is solid defensively that I think the Capitals are going to be a lot better. And, like I talked about, there is the possibility that some of these guys are going to get a call-up. You take a look at Priskie, you take a look at Iorio. These are the guys that killed it. They killed it down with the Hershey Bears, winning back-to-back Calder Cups, that they do have what it takes. We just need to see more of it. I don't know if it's just not the right chemistry with the deep pairings and the forward lines, but in any event, back-to-back losses, regardless if it's preseason or not, does not taste too well. We're hoping that they can find a way to overcome. But like I said, we don't have a lot of time. We'll see if any improvements can be made in, less than 24 hours. All right, so coming up here straight ahead, we'll talk about the outlook as they take on the Devils Wednesday evening and potential cuts that this team could face and the roster. I'll discuss straight ahead. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search. Match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to recent Indeed survey. So if you are involved in the hiring, if you are involved in the firing, or HR in general, you need Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about it on the Locked On Capitals podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. You need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So talking about the outlook, as the Capitals struggled in game number 1, they struggled in game number 2. How is this team going to play better in game 3, as it is the game that's going to be played Wednesday night? Well, the biggest thing I think is that I'm hoping, as I record this at 11:12 Eastern, that the Capitals will have more veterans in the lineup so we can get a better look at this team. We know that we do have some preseason games left to play, but let's make the most of it. And I'm going to go ahead and say squander it. We got to look, we got to taste. We saw these guys in preseason. We saw them at the camp. Okay, we know what we're working with. Let's roll out the big guns and see what we have. We've seen, the depth players out there, and we're taking another look during the season if there's injuries out there. But let's just get to the meat and potatoes and see what it's going to look like. Is Ovechkin, Strome, and Wilson? Or is it going to be Ovechkin, PLD, and Mangiapane? Put it in a snow globe and shake it up. Let's get a good look at it right now. This is the time to ascertain what the line combinations are going to be. Let's not just kind of waste this time in a lot of ways by these guys that you know for sure aren't going to be on the team. Now, there are players that are on the fringe. They are on tertiary moves that could possibly take place. I'm talking about even Miroshnichenko definitely needs more of a look. Andrew Cristall definitely needs more of a look. But the players other than that, we've seen it. And I think that to a certain extent, they don't want to burn out the big guns in these preseason games. And I get all that. I would say rotate them through, make them play less minutes, but I want to see what the best lines are going to be in game number one. I don't want Spencer Carberry, kind of frantic with his jaw clenched and the vein sticking out like, man, it's the first game of the season and I should have really been prepared for this. I want to know what my first line, my second, third, and fourth line are going to be, and then I want to know what the D pairings are. This is the time to tinker. I know that there are quite a few of preseason games, but we're already coming up on game number 3. Let's get to the nitty-gritty and figure out who is going to be playing what, where, why, and when, and also have contingency plans. For example, Wilson, Mangiapane, if that's not working for some reason, flip them out. Strome, PLD, so flip them out, those kind of things. And then take a look at the fourth line and the third line and see any differences. You take a look at Hendrik Lapierre and Connor McMichael. You take a look at Protas. Where's he going to play? Those kind of things. These are the things that need to be answered. And also to get a look at the net. And we think we know what it's going to be, but are there going to be certain things that are made apparent when the puck drops? This is the time to figure it all out. We don't want to be figuring it out in game number 1, or we don't want to be figuring it out in the last game of the preseason. Make hay while the sun shines is what they say up where I live. Let's do that and make the most of this opportunity. I want this team to hit the ground running in game 1. I want to throw away, the idea that, hey, it was only the first game or it was only one game. No, I want decisive victories right out of the gate. And I understand that the Capitals cannot win them all, but they are up against some fierce competition. And I don't want all the insiders to be right. That's what it's all about. I don't want them to say, hey, I guess I was pretty right at the end of the day. Wasn't I, Dan? Your team sucks. I don't want to hear that. I think that the Capitals have it intrinsically to be a really great team. So some tough decisions are going to need to be made. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not the GM. I just host a podcast, but I would reassign these players or just roll out the big guns in this next game. Guys that are a little bit of question marks, like I talked about Miro and Cristall and players like that. Okay, go ahead. We can get a longer look. But I still think that there are players on the roster right now that we know for sure are not going to be in the opening night lineup. Why squander this opportunity? We know what we've got already. It's like going through a song and dance. I'm getting a little worked up here, but I definitely do not want this team facing any complications, shall we say. But that positive note, Cristall has been impressive with 2 goals in 2 games, potentially complicating the Capitals' decision-making in the coming weeks. So if there's one thing to circle, if there's a couple players to circle that are on the fringe, of course, it's Miro and Cristall. Can Cristall swing for the fences? Can he connect and knock it out of the park? And I'm not just I'm talking about knocking it out of the park. I'm talking about an upper decker knock it out of the park and join the Capitals out of camp. Not go back to Kelowna. He has far exceeded playing in Kelowna. We need him on this team right now if he can continue to perform. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I get that. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid on Cristall. It's only 2 games, but I definitely think he has deserved an opportunity to play in game number 3 and just take it from there. Same thing goes for Miro. Those are the players that we know are potentially options. A lot of the other guys that I mentioned, we know are probably not going to look at. I mean, it's going to be a simple thing to take a look at. Pierre Dubé, not going to break camp with the team. You take a look at it. Rabinski, no. You take a look at it. Haman Octel, no. Vincent Iorio, no. Chase Priskie, no. Ilya Protas, no. Scarbosa, question mark. So it's pretty easy. And that was just me scrolling up and down the lineup from tonight's game, that it seems very apparent that those players will not be in the lineup. Maybe could one of those players sneak in there? maybe, but I think they definitely have their work cut out for them. And then kind of the elephant as well is players that are vying for jobs as well. You take a look at Vrana as well. Where does he fit into the Capitals' master plans? Let's get to it. Let's get a good look at these players so we know what we're working with. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are ultimately what makes this show successful. And how would you like to join the Locked On Capitals Insiders? Follow the link in the show description as I will post exclusive content. I will have impromptu short form podcasts. I will post videos on hidden channels on YouTube. I will have commentary on the game. So join the Locked On Capitals Insider. Just follow the link in the show description. I think you guys will love it. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.